Imagine this. It's 1969. The world is holding its breath, watching their televisions, waiting to see history made. But instead of hearing Neil Armstrong's famous words, we hear them in Russian.
Это один маленький шаг для человека, но гигантский скачок для человечества.
The Soviet Union, not the United States, becomes the first nation to land a human on the moon. How different would our world look today if that had happened? Let's set the scene. Back in the 1960s, the space race wasn't just about science. It was about prestige, influence, and proving which system could lead humanity into the future. The U.S. landing in July 1969 is often seen as the moment America won the space race. But if the Soviets had touched down first, the story would have unfolded very differently. For one, the space race probably wouldn't have fizzled out the way it did. In real history, once the U.S. landed on the moon, the public's interest cooled down, and funding for further missions dried up. But if the Soviets had planted their flag first, Washington would have been embarrassed. Instead of slowing down, the U.S. would have doubled down. That would have meant more Apollo missions, faster progress toward building lunar bases, and maybe even a manned mission to Mars way sooner than we imagined. On the Soviet side, being first would have been a massive propaganda victory. It would have boosted national pride, cemented their status as a technological powerhouse, and extended the life of their space program. We would have also seen serious Soviet efforts to establish permanent stations on the moon in the 1970s. But there would be a catch. The Soviet economy, which was as already under strain, would have taken a bigger hit. Landing first would have given them prestige, but it wouldn't have magically fixed deeper problems. Their long-term ability to sustain that momentum would be debatable. So what about the rest of the world? If the Soviets had landed first, it might have shifted alliances and perceptions worldwide. Countries that were undecided during the Cold War could have leaned more toward the Soviet sphere, believing it was the future. At the same time, the U.S. would have been motivated to showcase its strengths elsewhere through technology, military presence, or innovation. This could have made the Cold War even more intense, not just on Earth, but above it. Imagine a world where the moon itself became a symbol of military or political rivalry. If both nations had kept competing for decades, we might not just be talking about Artemis missions and SpaceX rockets. We might already have a permanent base on the moon. Maybe astronauts and cosmonauts would have set foot on Mars by the early 2000s. On the other hand, the costs of that competition could have drained resources from other areas of life. Healthcare, education, and everyday technology might have developed differently if trillions were poured into space rivalry. So would it have been better or worse? That depends on how you look at it. On one hand, humanity might be further along in space exploration, with bigger dreams realized earlier. On the other hand, the political and economic strain could have made the Cold War even more dangerous. What's certain is this: if the Soviets had landed on the moon in 1969, our timeline would look very different, and the night sky might feel a little less like a frontier and more like contested territory. But what do you think? Would a Soviet first step on the moon have sped up humanity's progress, or just fueled more rivalry? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more alternative history deep dives.